Let's take a volunteer to open us back up in prayer, please.
Lord, we do thank you for the new season and the many changes that are happening. I pray that our hearts would be prepared and aware of your Spirit. I do pray that in these times together, there would be freedom in our minds and our hearts to know that this is our family, and that we shouldn't be afraid to open up. I thank you for Justin's heart and wanting to teach us about your life, Father. And Tim also doing the same, and Noah. I pray that we would not overlook the time that we have together, but that we could make the best of it. Thank you, Father. Amen.
Thank you. All right, I hope you guys had a chance to read through a few times the homework that was assigned, but we're going to have Jaden read through it again and offer any thoughts or anything that stands out.
The seed of the palm tree. You want me to read it again?
Yes, please.
The seed of a palm tree. Two trees once met in an almost empty valley. One, an old fig with no fruit, and the other, a youthful palm in full bloom. The old tree inquired about the younger's presence in the valley, but the young tree only spoke in riddles, speaking of stumps and seeds. The elder tree questioned him further, but it only yielded answers that were of no avail. And so the two trees sat in destined silence for a long, long time. Until one day, men with axes entered the valley. The old tree trembled in fear, but the men passed him by. Not interested in old wood, they set their sights on the young tree, and with their axes sundered him apart. After only splinters of the palm remained, the old tree felt a strange sensation. His trunk became wet, and shortly thereafter, he withered and died, leaving behind only an old, withered stump. For a long, long time, only splinters and a stump adorned that lonely valley, until one day, from that old, withered stump, sprouted the seed of a palm tree.
Thank you. Thoughts? For context, the reference verses is the conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus. But there's also a personal application, which I will share after people comment they make.
I don't know if this is what you had attended, but was the leaves of the palm tree what was placed before Jesus before he died, or is that different?
Yeah, when he was entering into Jerusalem, they pulled palm trees down. It said it was in them. Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yep,
or I thought, but
very intentional.
you're saying that being the old tree. I mean, I would assume the old tree was representative of Nicodemus and the tree was Jesus. I could be wrong.
No, that is correct.
But I don't know how to explain my thoughts, but I like that it was like the other tree who has lived so much longer watched the one who had so much left be, I guess, sacrificed. And then because of that, it died itself and then came back to life. But, sorry, my thoughts are not very well explained, but I really like the way that.
I also realize the way I structured the poem makes it a little confusing. So is anybody like kind of confused still? Like enough so that they feel they can't properly offer thoughts? But if not, then I will be silent.
Doesn't seem confusing.
Okay. I tried to reword it this week just to make it a little more clear.
Kayla, your observation helped me to notice that it's an old fig tree with no fruit.
Mhm.
That reminds me, didn't Jesus curse a
Yes.
fig tree that wasn't bearing fruit?
Yep.
Mm.
Also intentional for that.
What does the trunk becoming wet mean?
I mean, in a way, it's kind of goofy, but the tree crying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's. I know it's kind of funky. There's a reason for it being funky, but the tree crying is essentially what I kind of meant by that.
Did everyone have a chance to read it this week? Okay. Might I encourage you? The reason I gave you guys a full week to read and consider the poem is so that you might come ready to engage with it. And so again, this is, I think, even on the heels of the encouragement that Noah gave earlier, right? This is the opportunity for us to share with one another how we're seeing things and perceiving things and getting to know one another. And so I certainly don't want to take over the conversation or veer away from what is being shared here, but it is really important that we treat this material that's assigned to us with the care and the consideration. And so, again, there's a time to be silent and a time to think about it and meditate upon it, and it's not that everyone always has something to say. But I don't want to fall into the continued practice of just the same voices being presented here. And I want to encourage you. I know that it is within all of you because I receive from you guys texts about your observations. Intentionally, I have you text me there. And so let us move beyond whatever is hindering us and offer it up so that we might engage in the material. That being said, I'll have you, Jaden, go ahead and transition to just sharing your heart and thoughts behind it.
So yeah, this was written about Jesus and Nicodemus, as I had said, but also like I guess kind of my hopes for what had happened with that brief conversation he had had with Jesus. If the ending is not clear, because I did word it a little wistfully, but both trees ended up dying. The palm tree was cut down, and the old tree, from grief in a way, also died. Of old age is another way you could put it. But both trees died. But from that stump of the old dead fig tree, a palm tree started to bloom. Not the fig, but the palm, which to me, it's kind of an analogy for the life and the self that the old fig was died after his conversation with the palm. In a way, I often like to think that after Nicodemus's conversation with Jesus, that led him down a path of his self dying and being reborn, as Jesus said, had to happen in that conversation. You will not understand what I'm saying unless you are reborn. That's in a way what happens here. The fig is gone and the palm is reborn within the fig. And that's kind of why I meant with like the trunk became wet and things like that. The reason for that weird wording was essentially tears, the wetness, right, makes that trunk a fertile ground for a new seed to sprout forth, right? In a ways that our sufferings often lay the groundwork for new life to be born within us, right? The old must die and the new must be reborn from it. Secondarily, there's that part of it, but this also, the Jesus and Nicodemus conversation reminded me of a lot of interactions I've had with Manuel in the past. And part of me writing this poem was even from my experience with Emmanuel's passing. And it's kind of funky that I would write myself as an old fig and him as a youthful palm, but in terms of the spiritual life, I think that's a very good way to put how we interacted with one another. I was very old, dead, and withered inside, and he was so youthful and full of life and bearing fruit, more important than anything else. And when he had passed, I was cleaning over at Granny's, and I remember at first I didn't know him that well at the time, and so it emotionally didn't really resonate with me, just because I never had a relationship with him. But then I remember as I was walking to my car and I had seen everybody down there, all the lights from their cars gathered at his house, I just started sobbing bitterly. And I couldn't understand why. I didn't have a relationship with this man. I didn't know him that well. And yet I cried very, very hard. And I think that his passing and his seeds being scattered to the wind is what allowed part of me to die that day and for something else to be born in its place. And so, in a way, this writing is also a testimony to that experience for me.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think the symbolism in your observation here, Jaden, of being old versus new. Romans talks a lot about this. There's the old nature, right, which is rooted in a wrong way to associate with what the law was intended to be. And so it is dead in its function in the law as being an end to itself. And then there's the new nature, which is the law of the Spirit, which gives life. And so I think that observation in that poem did a really good job of encapsulating all of those different moving parts. That the Lord ultimately is desiring for us to be new. And I think even the whole new nature of the tree. It's not merely just becoming a better version of oneself. It is becoming an entirely new thing.
And it's also being in the likeness of the palm tree.
Right.
Because it was not a new fig tree that sprouted. It was a palm tree that sprouted.
Yeah.
In other words, a tree in his image.
Yep. Wonderful. All right. Next week, is there any volunteers that want to be our sharer for next week?
For poems.
For your poem.
The one for Justin's class about your experience with Jesus.
I can share mine.
Okay. So if we have time towards the end of class, we'll have you just read through it. And then,
Written on docs.
okay.
Because I reread
Then
it. Sorry.
what we do is I'll have you send it out today.
Okay.
But let's take some considerable time this week to really, again, consider it and come ready to engage with one another in the material, because it is really truly meant to not just be a poem that we're analyzing, but it's for all of your writings.
Kayla, what will you name the poem whenever you do put it on there?
It will be Forgiven.
Forgive. Thank you.
So yeah, let's engage. That's okay. Let's engage with it and one another in this way, so that we can yield some fruitfulness from our time together with it. All right, let's open up to the chapter called The Race, which is chapter 14. We're going to read through a good portion of it, and so I know that you guys know the ending of it, what has happened. But I want you to take a moment to go back in time before you read it, and I want to ask this question before we jump into it. What were you hoping for? How are you hoping the race would go? Was anyone hoping that Ben-Hur would win?
I think there's a part of me that wanted him to win, but also receive some compliments that we talked about as well.
Yeah,
So maybe
to receive a little bit, maybe to win, but have a aha moment where he comes down a little bit.
At the beginning, before we read that chapter, I was like, yeah, I kind of wanted to win,
Mhm.
right? But after reading it down, I was like, maybe not.
Yeah. Was there anyone who didn't want him to win? Why?
Well, I mean, I wasn't being an author myself. I don't know why, but I kind of I wasn't like hoping for something, but I felt as if I had a guess that he would win, but I had a feeling that he would have come to a place that he needed to if he had lost.
Mhm.
Like it would have been hard. Like it would have been hard in a different way because it's kind of easy for him when he won, so he didn't need to reevaluate or anything like that. But as we've been going through, we've been noticing that his heart and mind aren't in a great place. So the vengeance, he's getting that desire, but it's still hard for him because obviously he can't actually be fully satisfied with getting vengeance. So
Good, Jade.
Similar, actually, very similar. I saw the writing on the wall that whoever won the race, which I assumed would be Judah, just based on the way things were going, that it was going to spell disaster for the inflation of their pride and sense of importance, a sense of self-importance. I am now curious. What I was actually not curious. What I was curious of then and still now was whoever ends up winning this will essentially, it's kind of the epitome of accomplishing everything you've ever wanted for both characters of Masala and Ben-Hur. So now that he is there, I'm curious what happens after you achieve everything you set out to achieve. Because similarly to Haley, I thought that whoever had the opportunity to lose would actually get a good chance for self-evaluation of is what I've been chasing after really worth it? And Judah was not afforded that, so we will see.
So for those of you that desired for him to win, why? Why did you want him to win?
Maybe it's kind of selfish on his part, but he did have a pretty rough life. I feel like even though no one really deserves anything, he kind of deserved to have a chance to have something go right. I feel like, I don't know if that's like not a good way to look at things, but just like a simple way, and the story was leading up to it. It's like, well, he's hoping he was fulfilled by that, and even if he's not, I feel like it'd be good for him to accomplish that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation, right? The way that his life was altered. You know, this is in a sense a type of redemption for him. And so we can't help but maybe in one sense root for him because he feels like an underdog. And that's intentionally how it's written as well. But again, let's draw out these in contrast and compare. You know, no matter how we feel about coming into it, whether we want him to win or not, there is kind of this ambivalence that we might have either way. Because we might identify with Judah and want him to win because he has had some difficulties. But we kind of know in our heart, right, that even if he wins, he doesn't really win. In fact, this whole race is the circus, right? Is a trap. This circus is a lot more comical in the way that we might think of it. It is really a circus, after all. And this is, of course, really intentional by the author to pit us in the story against ourselves in a sense of what we desire and what we want to see and how do we think about being justified and being renewed and having new opportunities and so maybe how we see Judah here in his pursuit of this is a little bit telling of our own hearts in this way. And so I don't think it's necessarily, Hannah, to answer this question that you pose, it's necessarily a good or a bad thing. it is meant to be a literary device for us then to identify with accomplishing the task at hand. Will he be fulfilled by winning? Will he feel justified by winning? Will he feel let down by winning? And of course, this should bring to our own hearts and minds, and anytime we have set out or put in our mind or desired something greatly, what was the outcome if we got the thing? Was that a good thing to get the thing? Or would it have been better for us had we not got the very thing we wanted? And of course, this is a little bit of a thought experiment here, because for Judah, at least from a fictional standpoint, there is some finality, right? We get the answer. But really where the book begins to pick up in many ways is from this point on. And so we see this in literary terms, what we call the rising action. And then we come to a peak or a pinnacle that is supposed to be where the resolve is at. And then there's this kind of trailing action. And so the race or the circus is meant to represent this. And the victory that is won here by Judah is meant to be the very top of the mountain. And what can we observe just in nature? What can we do at the very top of a mountain? Think in terms of view. You should be able to see clearly, right? We should be able to. And yet, so often, if we're not careful, right, this goes to how we posture the way that we perceive the world and we perceive our circumstances. And so, right, we can see clearly that from where we've come from. We can see clearly maybe the path is ahead of us, right? We can see the valley. We can see all of the landscape. But can we discern what the purpose is behind it, right? Because it's not that we have arrived at the top of the mountain, but there's something to be said about the journey to get up the mountain, and the journey then that is to go on beyond this, right? It is the process by which we observe life or walk through life that is of great importance. And what can't get lost here is he's going to reach his mountaintop. And has he learned the lesson by the close of this book? What do we think? Has he really been redeemed? This vengeance that he's acquired, was it a good thing for him? Or does it set a whole other trap for him? And then, not to mention, this was only one of his motivations, right? To get vengeance against Masala. But what is his other motivation? To find his mother and sister. And that is something that is yet unresolved. I've got to imagine a little bit, in an idealistic sense, what Judah might have been hoping for in his life is that he would find his mother and he would find his sister, and that they would be doing well, and they would be at the circus there to cheer him on. And of course, he would have victory against Masala, and Masala would be humbled in Judah's sight. And then I think if we even play this out further, the humiliation of Masala would look much more like him being very open and contrite, and then making amends with Judah, and Masala coming to his senses. Right? This is kind of the imagination that is built up. Like, this would be really the way that things could be truly justified and set right. And yet, that's not what happens at all. In fact, the victory Judah gets is a loss. The loss that Masala gets is a loss. And Judah is left in the very same place he was before he raced the race. And so I want to read back through together this race again, and consider, what is really taking place here with this action, right? That the author uses really well. This this race that is being laid out, right? And what we know, at least what we can observe, is, does Judah go into this race with this thought of being the happy warrior, this noble way of fighting the fight or winning the race? Or does he kind of go in with a little bit of something up his sleeve, right? He doesn't really participate in the race with integrity. And this, of course, opens up what will become the whole next part of the book that we read, where there will actually be a descent. And that's what we're meant to see, kind of this descent after he wins, and then there will be another ascent and another mountain that he has to climb and another opportunity for lessons learned. We'll start a few paragraphs in. It says, the rope fell, and all the four but his sprang into the course under urgency of voice and lash. What does that mean?
Right, he's calling us horses and get up.
Yeah, he is. But what else happened before his horses went?
All the others.
All the others shoot out, right? And so immediately he is lagging behind. And so we see that this is meant to, again, and I think, Hannah, you have a really good observation here. That it's meant to paint this picture of like his life is trailing behind. And let's observe that for most who are in the race, what we know to be true, except for Masala and Judah, most are just running the race for what? Just for the sake of victory in the race. But Masala has a vested interest in this race, right? He's wanting to win the race so that he can subdue Ben-Hur, Judah. And Judah is running the race because he wants to subdue Masala. And so we see the way that the race is formulated, right? There's kind of those that are running the race just to run the race. And there are those that are pitted against one another. He drew head to the right, and with all the speed of his Arabs, darted across the trails of his opponents, the angle of movement being such as to lose the least time and gain the greatest possible advantage. So while the spectators were shivering at the Athenians' mishap, and the Sidonian, Byzantine, and Corinthian were striving with such skill as they possessed to avoid involvement in the ruin, Ben-Hur swept around and took the course neck and neck with Masala. Now this is intentional by the author. He's putting them what? Neck and neck. There's a striving against one another. Masala is striving against Judah. Judah is striving against Masala. And in some ways, the way to victory is not whether they win against all of the other competitors. It's just that they outdo one another.
Okay. I just want to say with this start, what always struck me as so interesting, the reason he fell behind and all of that such is exactly what you were saying. I don't know if it is with Masala, because I didn't see it necessarily, but Judah absolutely is not racing to win. He's racing to make sure Masala loses.
Yes.
And so his intent, though, with staying behind is described here, so he can, because they started on opposite sides, right? He originally asked whoever Siamese helper was, I can't remember that guy's name, but like, where's my cart in placement to Masala's? And can you see if you can get me right next to him? And then you look at the placements, and they were actually placed on opposite ends. And so what Judah does instead is he intentionally lags behind, so all the other drivers go forward, and he goes behind them so he can get right next to Masala's cart. Again, he never cared about winning the race at all. He intentionally slowed behind and slowed his pace so he could ensure that when it counted, he could sabotage Masala. Because it was never about winning to him.
And this, of course, mirrors the way that Masala acts towards him in the incident at the start. Masala sweeps around, looks for an angle to do what? To win by making sure that Judah lost. That's how he found his position. And so there's this, again, this juxtaposition, right? We're meant to see here that Judah is no different than Masala. He's no better. And this should, again, like cause a little bit of ambivalence on our part because, man, do I really want this guy to win? Is winning really what's best for him? And again, I might just invite us all to consider the very things that we're so desirous of, that we become so fixed in obtaining. Do we ever consider that the thing that we want may not be the thing that we need? The marvelous skill shown in making this change, thus, from the extreme left across to the right without appreciable loss, did not fail the sharp eyes on the benches. The circus seemed to rock and rock again with prolonged applause. Then Esther clasped her hands in glad surprise, and Sanballat, smiling, offered his 100 sestertii. A second time, without a taker. And then the Romans began to doubt, thinking Masala might have found an equal, if not a master, and that in an Israelite. And now racing together side by side, a narrow interval between them. The two neared the second goal. The pedestal of the three pillars there, viewed from the west, was a stone wall in the form of a half circle, around which the course and the opposite balcony were bent in exact parallelism. Making this term was considered in all respects the most telling test of a charioteer. It was, in fact, the very feat in which Orestes failed. Now, Orestes is a god-type figure. It's actually one of the great Greek poems that are written about the race and the battle. And so we always want to think in terms of both Roman and Greek thought, and it will be mirrored here again in Masala's mantra, up or down Eros and up with Mars, right? It is about this victory over your foe. And so to Masala's mind, what Judah represents, and what we'll see, why Masala despises Judah is because Judah has what? He has love. And that is embodied in his filial love, his love for his mother and his love for his sister. And so this is a motivation for Masala at the start. And what it actually pulls Judah into is this camp of, again, Mars or war. As an involuntary admission of interest on the part of the spectators, a hush fell over all the circus, so that for the first time in the race, the rattle and the clang of the cars plunging after and tugging steeds were distinctly heard. Then it would seem Masala observed Ben-Hur and recognized him. And at once the audacity of the man flamed out in an astonishing manner. "Down, Eros! Up Mars!" he shouted, whirling his lash with practiced hands. "Down, Eros! Up Mars!" he repeated, and caught the well-doing Arabs of Ben-Hur a cut, the like of which they had never known. The blow was seen in every quarter, and the amazement was universal. The silence deepened. Up on the benches behind the console, the boldest held his breath, waiting for the outcome. Only a moment thus, then involuntarily down from the balcony, as thunder falls, burst the indignant cry of the people. So what happens? What did Masala do? He struck the other horses, right? This is of course poor sportsmanship, and it is recognized as such. And to the horses, there is this shock or this astonishment, right? Because they've never been treated this way. And so again, we're invited into this kind of neck and neck, back and forth in our own heart and mind about, well, man, now I feel bad for Judah again. Now I want Judah to win, because Masala's not fighting fair. But then, Judah will do things, and I'm not sure I want Judah to win. Maybe it's just better that the Corinthian, or the Sidonian, or the Byzantine wins. Maybe that would be what is best here. But we're caught up, right? Just as the crowd is caught up. And really what this paints a picture for us is now the battle lines are really clearly drawn within the hush of the crowd. This is seen as a race between Masala and Judah as well. The four sprang forward affrighted. No hand had ever been laid upon them except in love. No, it was a hand was laid upon them in what? In war. Eros versus Mars. They've only known Eros, love. And now they have a taste of what? War and Mars. They have been nurtured ever so tenderly. And as they grew, their confidence in man became a lesson to men, beautiful to see. What should such dainty natures do under such indignity but leap as from death? Forward they sprang as with one impulse, and forward leaped the car. Past question, every experience is servable to us. Where got Ben-Hur the large hand and mighty grip which helped him now so well? Where but from the oar with which so long he fought the sea? And so we see that in many ways, Judah is conditioned for the moment. How did he develop the strength and the cunning and the bravery and the fearlessness that was required? Well, it was in the very place that Masala had effectively sent him through his own deceit. And what was this spring of the floor under his foot to the dizzy electric lurch with which the trembling ship yielded to the beat of staggering billows, drunk with their power. So he kept his pace and gave the four free rein and called to them in soothing voice, trying nearly to guide them round a dangerous turn. And before the fever of the people began to abate, he held back the mastery.
Recording in progress.
Now, again, there is this sense that what Judah is doing for the horses is not something he has done for himself. Where they have received a lash, he encourages them to stay patient and faithful to the task. And yet what he does in his own heart, in his own soul, it is given over right wildly to this idea of vengeance. And so do we see the interplay here that the author is using to juxtapose who Judah ought to be and how he ought to what? To come under the loving admonishment of the master. And the master here is not represented by Mars, but by Eros. Right? A master who is a master of love. And yet we don't see that condition again play out in Judah's own heart. Nor not only on approaching the first goal, he was again side by side with Masala, bearing with him the sympathy and admiration of everyone not a Roman. So clearly was the feeling shown, so vigorous its manifestation that Masala, with all his boldness, felt it unsafe to trifle further. And so this is even now not just drawing the battle lines between Judah and Masala, but it's drawing the battle lines in the crowd from those who have an affection for Rome and for those who will hate Rome. Now again, think in terms of civil war. This is kind of this challenge between unity and disunity. What is the feature that brings people together? What empowers true unity? Love. And what empowers disunity? War. And so again, this is meant to play upon the way that we feel. And so again, how do we feel about this battle back and forth and back and forth? How many of you were so adamant you wanted Judah to win? Like, just get to the victory already. I can't wait for the victory. How many of you were so adamant you wanted him to lose? How many of you were feeling the tug? What's best?
It's totally silly, but there was part of me that, like, the entire time I read the book, until I got to the point where I knew what the part I wanted to hear was going to be. I'm trying not to spoil it, but was the mom and daughter that you were talking about, and I'm like, well, if he wins the race, maybe they'll be that step much closer.
Yeah.
Finding, like that's kind of that was my eye of the entire book, because to me they're the innocent ones that were, in the wrong place, and not have much control.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was, to me, I didn't actually think of it that way, to win or to lose, Masala or Ben-Hur, because I didn't really care for either. What happened to either one of them?
Right.
My whole thought process was, can I just find out the mom? And this is.
That's a really good observation. How many of you were there? How many of you were like, getting out with the race? Let's find your mom and sister.
Well,
I think that's a big part
of the story, but I'm like, okay, this is part of the story that's going to bring forth redemption or whatever.
I was there in terms of, I was more interested in the outcome of the race and what the author was going to do, but not so much who won the race.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't have a desire for who, but I was very curious to see. Like, my interest was in what's going to be produced in this. I wasn't necessarily rooting for one or the other. I just knew that this was going to be a springboard for something big to happen in terms of character.
Yeah. Yeah, but a springboard. Springboard for what, right? That's the question.
Probably deterioration.
Yeah. It could be.
That was my assumption.
Yeah. I think that's really good, right? Like, so the way that we observe this, right, I think that's a good way to think about it, Rachel, that there might be even a desire to move beyond this because there's a greater thing, right? Like if you identify with vengeance, the race becomes very important. If you identify with redemption, the story of the mother and the sister is of course something that you will be very, very highlighted. But he has to go through the race. That is what is before him now. As the cars whirled round the goal, Esther caught sight of Ben-Hur's face, a little pale, a little higher raised, otherwise calm, even placid. Right? We see now a little bit of this picture of the happy warrior. Because what? He is calm in the face of battle. And so we see within Judah some glimpses here, right? Man, what could be in Judah's life if he would just grab hold of this reality of the kingdom? What would it be like if we were to just really grab hold, to take the reins, to really jump into, or better said, to really come under the reins of, or the control of, or the discipline of the loving hand that is guiding us? Immediately a man climbed on the entablature at the west end of the division wall and took down one of the conical wooden balls. A dolphin on the east entablature was taken down at the same time. In a like manner, the second ball and the second dolphin disappeared. This is just the way that they would measure how far into the race that they went. And then the third ball and the third dolphin. So he kind of like is pushing us through the narrative here, right? Like he's not trying to drag it out. And this is actually what it does, is it creates a little bit more intensity and a desire to find out. Had he written in a way that like drew this out more and more paragraphs, what would probably happen is you kind of lose this energy moving forward. And so here you're like, it's almost done. What is taking place? I don't know. 3 rounds concluded. Still Masala held the inside position. That's the favorable position, right? This is the position Masala has held almost the entire narrative of the story. He's had the inside track here. Still, the other competition followed as before. The contest began to have the appearance of one of the double races which became so popular in Rome during the late Caesarean period. Masala and Ben-Hur in the first, the Corinthian, Sidonian, and Byzantine in the second. Meantime, the ushers succeeded in returning the multitude to their seats, though the clamor continued to run the rounds, keeping, as it were, even pace with the rivals in the course below. In the 5th round, the Sidonians succeeded in getting a place outside Ben-Hur, but lost it directly. The 6th round was entered upon without change of relative positions. Gradually, the speed had been quickened. Gradually, the blood of the competitors warmed with the work. Men and beasts seemed to know alike that the final crisis was near, bringing the time for the winner to assert himself. No doubt, as he is writing these words, Lew Wallace is writing these words, his thoughts are reflecting upon the pitched battle of the Civil War. There is this again, rising action. And think in terms of, again, the happy warrior at the background. Because as the battle is reaching a pitch, what is going on within the heart of the happy warrior? Well, he is stilled and calm and resolute. It is not the external things that motivate him, right? It is the man who has control in the inward parts, right? Whose soul has been conditioned. It is that man who is embodied in the happy warrior. The interest which from beginning had centered chiefly in the struggle between the Roman and the Jew, with an intense and general sympathy for the latter, put fast changing to anxiety on his account. On all the benches, the spectators bent forward, motionless, except as their faces turned following the contestants. Ilderim quitted combing his beard, and Esther forgot her fears. 100 sestertii on the Jew, cried Sanballat to the Romans under the council's awning. There was no reply. A talent, or 5 talents, or 10, choose ye. He shook his tablets at them defiantly. I will take thy sestertii, answered a Roman youth preparing to write. Do not so, interposed a friend. Why? Masala hath reached his utmost speed. See him lean over his chariot rim, the reins loose as flying ribbons. Look then at the Jew. The first one looked. By Hercules, he replied, his countenance falling. The dog throws all his weight on the bits. I see. If the gods help not our friend, he will be run away with by the Israelite. No, not yet. Look, Jove with us, Jove with us. The cry swelled by every Latin tongue, shook the velaria over the consul's head. If it were true that Masala had attained his utmost speed, the effort was with effect. Slowly but certainly, he was beginning to forge ahead. His horses were running with their heads low. From the balcony, their bodies appeared actually to skim the earth. Their nostrils showed blood red in expansion. Their eyes seemed straining in their sockets. Certainly the good steeds were doing their best. How long could they keep the pace? It was but the commencement of the 6th round. On they dashed. And as they neared the second goal, Ben-Hur turned in behind the Romans' car. And so what they're observing in the crowd is what? That while Masala is straining and he's gaining some ground, Judah and his horses have not really yet begun to race. And so there's some concern here now, and yet Masala is fully given over, right, to this victory. The joy of the Masala faction reached its bound. They screamed and howled and tossed their colors, and Sanballat filled his tablets with wagers of their tendering mouth. In the lower gallery over the gate of triumph, found it hard to keep his cheer. He had cherished the vague hint dropped to him by Ben-Hur of something to happen in the turning of the western pillars. Now, what does this mean? Something to happen. That Judah has a plan all along, as Jaden observed, right? To keep Masala in proximity to him. Because what Judah is after is vengeance. And vengeance at all costs. And not to win the race. And this is a betrayal. In some sense, it's a betrayal of Ilderim, who gives him the horses, right? These horses that should win. It's a betrayal of himself, because he's given himself fully over to the wrong way, a wrong mindset. And it's a betrayal of Masala, because no matter what we feel about Masala, right, we don't want to fall under the very strict standard of an eye for an eye, or a tooth for a tooth. Why? Why do we not want to mete out the level of discipline or the level of judgment to somebody who's given that to us? And what was the silver rule?
Impose on others what you yourself do not desire.
Right. Think about how the Lord has even orchestrated that sharing today along the lines of this. Right? Judah can't expect to come away from this clean-handed. And we will see this play itself out in another character that will be introduced shortly in the person of Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate, when he comes into contact with Jesus, does what? He washes his hands of it. And yet, he can't really wash his hands of it because he is complicit. He is involved. See, Judah cannot wash his hands of what he's about to do because there was intention and purpose on his part to do what would happen next. Over in the east end, Simonides' party held their peace. The merchant's head was bent low. Ilderim tugged at his beard and dropped his brows till there was nothing of his eyes but an occasional sparkle of light. Esther scarcely breathed. Iris alone appeared glad. Along the home stretch, 6th round, Masala leading, next to him Ben-Hur, and so close, it was the old story. First flew Emulus, the Pharishian, steeds, with those of Tros and Dimed, seeds close on Emulus's back. They puff the wind and seem just mounting on his car behind, full of his neck. He feels the sultry breeze and hovering o'er their stretching shadow sees. This is, again, the story of a race where we can anticipate the ending. Thus to the first goal and round at Masala, fearful of losing his place. Now notice what's shift here between Masala. Masala was what going into the race? Confident. And something has shifted here. He's now fearful of losing. Hugged the stony wall with perilous clasp, a foot to the left, and he had been dashed to pieces. Yet, when the turn was finished, no man, looking at the wheel tracks of the two cars, could have said, "Here went Masala, there the Jew." They left but one trace behind them, and they whirled by. Esther saw Ben-Hur's face again, and it was wider than before. Simonides, shrewder than Esther, said to Ilderim, the moment the rivals turned into the course, "I am no judge, good sheik. If Ben-Hur be not about to execute some design, his faith hath that look." And so Judah Ben-Hur's face has betrayed him it is clear that there is something going on. To which Ilgrim answered, saw you how clean they were and fresh. By the splendor of God, friend, they have not been running, but now watch. One ball and one dolphin remained on the entablatures, and all the people drew a long breath, for the beginning of the end was at hand. First the Sidonian gave the scourge to his fore, and smarting with fear and pain, they dashed desperately forward, promising for a brief time to go to the front. The effort ended in promise. Next the Byzantine and Corinthian each made the trial with like result, after which they were practically out of the race. Thereupon, with a readiness perfectly explicable, that all the factions except the Romans joined hope in Ben-Hur and openly indulged their feeling. Ben-Hur, Ben-Hur, they shouted, and the blent voices of the many rolled overwhelmingly against the consular stand. From the benches above him, as he passed, the favor descended in fierce injunctions. Speed thee, Jew, take the wall now. On, loose the Arabs, give them rein and scourge. Let them not have the turn on thee again, now or never. Over the balustrade they stooped low, stretching their hands imploringly to him. Either he did not hear or could not do better, for halfway round the course, and he was still following. At the second goal, even still no change. He is waiting for the very last second. Why? Why is he waiting? Remember, his intention is to not merely defeat Masala, but to humble him, to embarrass him. This is very intentional on Judah's part. And we see the crowd now so on Judah's side. And what we should be left with here is the feeling of disgust and almost a disliking for cheering him on. And now to make the turn, Masala began to draw in his left-hand steeds, an act which necessarily slackened their speed. His spirit was high. More than one altar was richer of his vows. The Roman genius was still president. Of these three pillars, only 600 feet away were fame, increase of fortune, promotions, and triumph, ineffably sweetened by hate, all in store for him. That moment, Malak in the gallery saw Ben-Hur lean forward over his Arabs and give them the reins. Out flew the many-folded lash in his hand. Over the backs of the startled steeds it writhed and hissed and writhed again and again. And though it fell not, there were both sting and menace in its quick report. And as the man passed thus from quiet to resistless action, his face suffused, his eyes gleaming. Along the reins he seemed to flash his will, and instantly not one, but the four as one answered with a leap that landed them alongside the Roman's car. Masala, on the perilous edge of the goal, heard, but dared not look to see what the awakening portended. From the people he received no sign. Above the noises of the race, there was but one voice, and that was Ben-Hur's. In the old Aramaic, as the sheik himself, he called to the Arabs. Now remember, he's calling to the stars here. Right? The stars are what is leading him. Will he follow? On a tear, on Rigel, what Antares dost thou linger now? Good horse, aho, Aldebaran. I hear them singing in the tents. I hear the children singing and the women singing of the stars of Ater, Antares, Rigel, Aldebaran, victory. And the song will never end. Well done. Home tomorrow, under the black tent. Home, on Antares. The tribe is waiting for us, and the master is waiting. 'Tis done, ha ha. We have overthrown the proud. But has he? He's overthrown Masala's pride, but his own lingers on. The hand that smote us is in the dust. Ours the glory. Ha ha, steady. The work is done. So ho, rest. There had never been anything of the kind more simple, seldom anything so instantaneous. At the moment chosen for the dash, Masala was moving in a circle round the goal. To pass him, Ben-Hur had to cross the track, and good strategy required the movement to be in a forward direction. That is, on a like circle limited to the least possible increase. The thousands on the benches understood it all. They saw the signal given, the magnificent response, the four close outside Masala's outer wheel, Ben-Hur's inner wheel, behind the other's car, and this they saw. Then they heard a crash loud enough to send a thrill through the circus, and quicker than thought, out over the course, a spray of shining white and yellow flinders flew. Down on its right side toppled the bed of the Roman's chariot. There was a rebound of the axle hitting the hard earth, another and another. Then the car went to pieces, and Masala, entangled in the reins, pitched forward headlong. So what do we feel now towards Masala? Do we feel that Masala is getting what he deserves? Or do we feel a little bit of sympathy for Masala? Well, again, this is meant to expose our own hearts to us. This is a hard thing, right? Because surely we don't really want Ben-Hur to win in this way. It just doesn't feel right. And this, again, is a commentary that Lew Wallace is giving to us about what it means to win. It means other people have to lose. And it's one thing, right, to fight the valiant fight and to be righteous in doing it, and for there to be a loser on the other side. It's a whole other thing to be one who is proud in his own victory. To increase the horror of the sight by making death certain, the Sidonian, who had the wall next behind, could not stop or turn out. Into the wreck, full speed he drove, then over the Roman and onto the ladder fours, all mad with fear. Presently, out of the turmoil, fighting of the horses, the resound of blows, and murky cloud of dust and sand, he crawled in time to see the Corinthian and Byzantine go down the course after Ben-Hur, who had not been an instant delayed. The people arose and leaped upon the benches and shouted and screamed. Those who looked that way caught glimpses of Masala, now under the trampling of the floors, now under the abandoned cars. He was still. They thought him dead. But far greater number followed Ben-Hur in his career. They had not seen the cunning touch of the reins by which, turning a little to the left, he caught Masala's wheel with the iron-shod point of his axle and crushed it. But they had seen the transformation of the man. What does that mean? What transformation did they see? Emptiness. But what kind of transformation is taking place here? And they themselves felt the heat and glow of his spirit, the heroic resolution. Yeah, see, there's such a commentary here on the circus again. The circus and bread is given to the masses for what purpose? To tame them. This is no heroic resolution that's taking place. And yet what this race is conjuring up for everyone is kind of this bloodlust. It's almost as if the crowd is very grateful that they not only get to see Ben-Hur win, but they get to see death and destruction. I mean, this is exactly what the culture of the world is like. The tearing down of another to be right in our own justifications. The maddening energy of action with which, by look, word, or gesture, he so suddenly inspired his Arabs, and such running, it was rather the long leaping of lions in harness. But for the lumbering chariot, it seemed the four were flying. When the Byzantine and Corinthian were halfway down the course, Ben-Hur turned the first goal, and the race was won. Now, how do we feel here in this moment? Do we feel the release of tension? Or do we feel unresolved? Right? There's this transformation that took place within him, or so it would seem, and yet nothing really has changed for Judah. Right? As we read the story, is everything settled for Judah now in his life? He got his vengeance. And as we read further, what do we find out happens to Masala? He's paralyzed. He's not likely to ever, and that's kind of a sigh of relief, right? Like, at least he didn't die. But it's kind of like that, again, that bittersweetness that it's like, oh, I'm thankful he didn't die, but man, he didn't really deserve this either. But we can also see that what Masala experiences is kind of the principle of sowing and reaping. He's reaped destruction upon himself because of his actions towards Judah. So why is it that we're here left as we close out this book with this turmoil with Judah where things aren't resolved? Well, it's because vengeance was never sufficient enough for him to feel at peace or to feel settled. Why? Because the question of his mother and sister loomed larger. And so what we do see with the finality of the race, what it actually clarifies for Judah is what? That his motivation for vengeance really wasn't the thing that was pulling him forward quite as much as maybe he had felt in the moment. Because vengeance was his, and yet his life is unresolved because he doesn't know the whereabouts of his mother and his sister. And so we will leave it there for this week. And we will pick up this week by you guys reading the first 3 chapters of book the 6th. All right, let's take a few minutes break.